But like, it's crazy that you went to New York Academy of Art, that you who came from Boise, Idaho.
Oh, it's a weird story. Because my story is dumb. Because
Okay.
it shouldn't have happened is basically what I mean. It like
You were the accidental artist.
I'm like the salmon that went through the turbines and didn't get squished or whatever, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Because like although I love the the landscape here, it can also
Yeah.
be kind of a trap because what are your options? Farmer, rancher,
Mm-hmm.
um, not that any of those things
Truck
are.
driver.
Yeah, I mean they're fine, but that's not what I wanted to do. And
Yeah.
Boise's even, we're landlocked, so like,
Oh, yeah.
what was the closest museum to us? You could drive 7 hours to Seattle.
Like Salt Lake City or something.
I don't think Salt Lake has anything that I wanted to look at.
Maybe not. But I haven't actually been there, but I mean, I've been to Salt Lake, but I haven't been to the museums there. But there's like some sort of like Soviet or Russian art collection in like Springville or Springdale or something. Not Idaho, Utah. And I bet there's a lot of like Western.
I wasn't
Yeah.
into that. Like, I guess I was kind of a snob. I was like, well, if I'm gonna access, it has to be like through Velasquez or
Yeah.
Rubens, or I know it sounds like a snobby thing. I wasn't gonna lower myself and be like, okay, Frederick Remington, give me all you got, like,
Well, and it like that was like that had all these like cultural connotations
yeah,
that were you were just like overly absorbed in, probably, that were annoying.
yeah,
I bet now as an older person, you probably have find some appreciation in some of that stuff
yes, for sure, absolutely,
more
yeah,
than you did. But I know exactly what you mean, because it's like you have a craving for just the broader experience, broader
yeah,
human experience. Yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, I think your current occupation is artist, you
Yeah.
know? So you're an artist and your job is artist.
Yes. That's what I put on my taxes. And I teach art. I love teaching classes. I get a little bit lonely in the studio. I need that quiet time, but I also need time talking to people. So I
Mm-hmm.
find it stimulating to work with students. And I find I wrestle with this all the time, because so many of the artists I admire so much
Mm-hmm.
and that are really making interesting work and really getting out into the world, I know they're painting like way more than I am.
Mm.
I paint every week, and I don't always paint every day, but I
Mm-hmm.
paint like 3 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
um but I'm interested in so many things too, so I really have to discipline myself to just get started, like.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's also very important though.
I mean, there's so much to internally kind of struggle with being an artist.
Mm-hmm.
Really, one of the things I think I was a preconceived idea was, I mean, I definitely expected it to be easier, which is, I expected to be able to, I don't know, have more. I didn't expect to do so much business for yourself, like
Mm.
I didn't expect to have to like get out and try to put my art places to be seen.
Okay.
I expected that there would be more, just maybe more opportunities to show it, or things. And
Okay.
I guess that the thing that comes to mind.
Like,
um,
do you think that there was a little bit of a romantic idea, or was it
of
kind
being
of?
an artist. Good question.
I know I certainly had a romantic idea. I think I can relate to that what you're saying. Like,
My like one idea I had of an artist was like staying up late and drinking a lot.
that's
It's
funny.
true, but I did come, but it's been a while. It's been a while that I came to terms with the fact of like, yeah, like I don't I don't function very well at nighttime, you know.
Okay.
I prefer to like my painting time. One of the questions that you had suggested to think about is about sort of your routine.
Yeah.
And I find my routine is painting in the afternoon really suits me well.
Okay.
I sort of take care of some stuff in the email in the morning, kind of slowly kind of start the day, do like gym, food, kind of get set for the day, and then that afternoon chunk is really nice for painting for me. Um but it's nice to have stuff set up so there's like so like if I get really annoyed if I'm like painting and then it's like dinner has to be made and I always
Mm,
feel like I never feel like my hands are clean enough and I always feel like just irritated about having to go from this like painting space to like this more practical space. So it's nice if I can kind of like prep all that ahead of time so that when I drop out of painting, I can just like be done, you know,
okay.
because
So
it's
that's
exhausting.
what's exhausting, the
Painting is exhausting.
physically, mentally, emotionally.
Yeah, all of mostly like mentally, but physically, yes, if like you have to like hike in outside and you're in the sun and stuff like that, but mostly physically, it's fine. But mentally, it's sort of like I'm just wrung, you know?
Because you're problem solving a lot while you're painting.
Yeah, and the focus is so intense and um I mean it's a pleasure. It's like a it is a pleasure, but it's work. It's sort of like I love that this recent idea that's come up in the last few years of flow state. You know,
Okay.
you've heard of that idea. You've
A
heard of
little
that
bit.
idea, right?
A little bit.
And I think it's some sort of measurable state of your brain, but where
Mm.
you, and I know you've experienced it, where when you just get started, you can go a long time without eating.
Yeah.
You know, you're really, your brain is really like engrossed in what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
You're sort of turning off a lot of these other things and I think then when you go back to like normal state, I think you're a little wrung out. I mean, do you feel wrung out after you paint?
I think it depends on the painting or the day, but I would say that certainly my experience is if I have to problem solve,
Right,
yeah,
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 I could like kick somebody after a day of painting.
yeah.
Like
Yes,
it's
I need
it
some food, let me lay down.
yeah, yeah, all of those things. That's why I have a couch right there.
Yeah, I have a hammock in my
That's
studio.
that's great. That's just as good.
Yeah,
So,
exactly, like you need that.
but then does that mean that you like prefer silence or do you listen to music? Like if it's a lot of mental energy?
Yeah, no, I love music or a podcast or a book or something, audiobook.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of admire like music is always like probably the best, but like some paintings that I'll do, like I'll think like I can look at it and kind of remember whatever podcast or book I was listening to.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of admire people that do with silence because I kind of feel like they're focusing better than me. You know, I'm always like, what would that be like? I don't know if I can, you know, I'm like a little jealous of that. I'm like, you know, if I'm like operating on like like a more nervy plane than those people who are just like, no, I need silence.
Yeah, but it makes sense that if you didn't grow up watching television, like maybe you need a certain low level stimulus.
Maybe, yeah, there you go. Like to survive in this modern world, you must have some amount of that kind of input. Um, no, I'm a big creature of habit and I love a routine and I love to have plans. I don't
Okay.
like to surprise myself, you know. Getting tea if anything is you know, maybe a habit slash ritual.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool. What's your favorite tea? Like for
Black tea.
for painting, just black tea, no sugar.
Oh, I just drink all the time. I just
Okay.
drink the Yorkshire Gold black tea. It's delicious. And then at a certain point, like 4 or 5 o'clock, then I switch to peppermint.
See, but then that part of your early fantasy is true. It's just it's not alcohol.
Yeah, yeah, it's I guess so.
You drink all the time and you make art, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so what audiobooks like have been like huge in your painting experience or journey, or what podcast or particular
Mhm.
albums that you got on repeat, or do you listen to
Okay.
Spotify, or how do you access all this?
Yeah, yeah. I do Spotify, and okay. So my most noble and arty response is going to be like, um, most recently, like that Fiona Apple album. Have you listened to that?
Like the very, very most
Yeah,
recent
yeah.
release?
Uh
I,
huh.
I I just started after I sent you those questions.
Okay, it's really good, and it's super interesting because, and I was listening to a thing about her. Like, she has like a classical background,
Yeah.
and she's super creative,
Uh-huh.
and like in that album, you can hear she's really expressive about the way that she sings and her lyrics, and like there'll be like a dog bark that's like a percussive thing. It's fantastic. I'm relating to something that is like that has more of a spark for me. But a lot of times, frankly, like I'll listen to, I mean, this is like what everybody is, like a true crime thing, you know, which is not that, which is, there's no high spark for that. That's just like, it's interesting.
Like a
Um,
podcast of true crime?
yeah, podcast, true crime, or news podcasts. I listen to like The Daily is really good. One of my like tragedies in life is I did not get a master's degree. I did not get a bachelor's degree. So I don't have really standing to participate in these sort of university level things.
Mm-hmm.
And and I'm not going to go do it because I'm not going to spend the money on it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
I just am not. And if I were to get any kind of degree, I would honestly get like an environmental science degree because I'm really interested in geology and biology, especially of my bioregion here. Very
Mm-hmm.
interested in that. Anyway, but so to listen to the Getty, where that they're like all these like scholars are creating, you know, things for the ages, like volumes that will be, you know, and
Very cool.
organizing. It's super interesting. Yeah. I really like country music, which is funny because like what we were talking about earlier when you're talking about Frederick Remington, like I grew up in Eagle Point, Oregon, where country music and like Bon Jovi was like what everybody liked. You
Okay.
know, you're like, I'm sure it was similar in Boise.
Yeah. I don't know about Bon Jovi, but
Well, maybe you're just like enough younger than me that the Bon Jovi wasn't, because it was literally everything, you know,
I think
hair metal.
yeah, hair metal, uh I mean it's a toss up between a lot of different things, but are you talking about like Bon Jovi circa Young Guns with like
Yeah. And
okay.
I mean, that would have been when he was more successful. So, like, okay, so I'm 43, going to be 44. So, like, I remember my best friend in like fifth and sixth grade was like really into Bon Jovi,
That's
and
so weird that you could be a fifth grader into Bon Jovi.
yeah, right. I
No one's
know.
uttered those words except you right now.
No, it would be real normal in Eagle Point. Trust me.
Hey, remember when we were into Bon Jovi? Yeah, I think we were in the fifth grade.
Yeah, but I mean the radio, like the
Yeah.
radio was like how you got stuff. And so I listened to like every Sunday the top 40 radio show, and I would like record songs and write down the top 5 or something. And
Wait, do you know how old you are when you're in the fifth grade?
how old are you?
Like 10?
Yeah, I guess so.
So
Yeah.
when your daughter was 10, did she do top 40 radio stuff or whatever?
Huh, what did she like when she was 10? You know, and it's weird how the world changed though, because radio already by the time my daughter was 10 wasn't as much of a part of people's lives.
That's
So
true.
so her God, I don't remember what she was into when she
I
was 10, but she definitely had strong ideas, but I don't
okay.
know if it was as much. she liked certain, maybe I remember her liking certain TV shows, you know, and she
Oh,
had her
okay.
own ideas like about TV shows. Like the weirdest thing, my daughter, like when she saw Star Wars, or not Star Wars, Star Trek on TV, like reruns, obviously, for the first time, she was like, I was like flipping through the channels on a TV you turned, because I had an old TV, and she would be like, which was really low. She's like, "What was that?" I was like, "That nothing," you know. And she was like into it right away. I was like, "Who
That's
even
cool.
likes this stuff? It's horrible."
That's
So,
funny. I like that. That's cool. So you were in the 5th grade. You liked Bon Jovi.
well, I liked it okay, but my
Oh, okay.
friends liked it. It was sort of like, I remember my cultural taste when I was like, you know, middle school, junior, or what we call junior high, high school, was more like what, like I was like kind of into skaters, and like
Hmm.
I remember when Beastie Boys came, like when I first heard it, I was like, "Ooh, what's that?" And then
Uh-huh.
I remember on MTV at somebody's house, there was like, when I first heard Tribe Called Quest, I was
Mm-hmm.
like, "Stop! What is that?" You know.
Yeah.
So that was kind of more what I liked. But what was like my friends, you know, when you grow up in the country, it was like you're friends with people that you get along, that are around you. You're not
Yeah.
necessarily friends with people who like the same things you like,
Yeah.
or like, it's like more like, can you get along?
Yeah.
So I had a best friend that was next door. She really liked like country music, and then this other best friend who really liked like Bon Jovi type of stuff. I didn't ever really like that, and I always kind of saw it a little bit as like a stereotype, or it was like cheesy or something. Like I didn't see the coolness of it. But I kind of now am like coming around to, and country music especially was especially torturous. But now I'm coming around to being like, I love it. And it sort of has like even some of that country that was like 80s country, that was sort of like the bad country, you
Mm-hmm.
know, is now, I don't know, like I don't know if it's nostalgia or what, but my dad's family is from Missouri,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't move to Oregon until the 1960s. And so, and when my dad was like a teenager, so and he was from a very large family that I grew up around, a lot of them. So I have a lot of strong cultural influences that really are much more that sort of Appalachia influence.
Mm-hmm.
There's something that's very resonant to me, like Jason Isbell and Drive By Truckers, and
Mm.
Gillian Welch, stuff like that is just beautiful, and it kind of makes me wish I could, like, you know, strum a guitar around a little bit, you know, just to be able to sing and participate in that kind of music making, because it. So that was a long digression. Sorry.
No, it was good. So, but that's so that country's on your playlist.
Definitely, yeah, and more so, yeah. It has never just been a white thing, but it's sort of mostly mostly been a white thing, I guess. But it really isn't, you know, especially. But there just hasn't been as much maybe promotion of it. But
I think it took some time for it to gain traction with
yeah,
non-white people.
well, yeah, but there's like, yeah, I think so too. But there's that overlap of the roots, you know.
No, I agree, but I mean, like, uh, American music is this very kind of hybridized, complicated thing
Yeah,
that doesn't take in certain areas, but does in other areas for different reasons. And sometimes accessibility is
yeah,
one. Another thing could also be like cultural pressure, like, oh,
yeah,
ew, you like country, you know?
yeah. Oh,
So
yeah. Mhm.
yeah, yeah. And I think you're right though. Like there's definitely more people who are, if they're musicians, that grew up with a certain amount of that, but they're also through that music are able to access some of these other things. And I guess in terms of labeling it as a genre, it's called country.
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny, this is sort of related to a point that I see in art a lot, where I think like sometimes if something is too close but not the same, they're going to repel each other more
Yeah.
than something that's quite different because there's sort of like a respect there. Like, for instance, going back to like the academic training, you know, Semyon for a while had such a disdain for like the Florence Academy, like this sort of a more value-based approach.
Okay.
He totally looked down on that. And then also then there would be, I remember hearing some stuff of like uh, how, you know, Florence Academy, like Varg study
Mm.
was like, oh, that is the best way, or, you know, like, and it's like, if from the outside of like, you're both doing realist representational art, you
Do you
know,
think it
like,
was allowed for you and other students at the Ashland Academy to contest certain views?
no, that was not allowed. Absolutely not. We had, Semyon had whole lectures on the Académie Julienne was so much better than the Barg, because the Barg was like, he claimed the Barg was set up as like an easy version, as like not literally kindergartners, but as like a kindergartner version of the Académie Julienne, and the
Mm.
Julienne was so much better because it was more form was involved. So yeah, so if you were like taking the Barg book seriously, you were inviting a lot of like, you were inviting a lecture. You know, it was much safer if you're like, oh, I love this Bouguereau. There's no problem there. Even though Bouguereau was the French Academy, but even better would be like, oh, Repin, you know, which of course is awesome. You know, it's
Yeah.
the best. You know, but and I actually do, having come around, I kind of do think, yeah, the late 19th century Russians are, I mean,
Yeah.
ridiculously good
Yeah.
and definitely deep and
Hmm.
complicated
Hmm.
and technically amazing. I mean, they hit all the marks. So,
There's basically like very little appreciation for that kind of Russian art in this country has been my experience. You can't even find books.
yeah,
People are not very well educated on the subject, and you can't really, like there's not a lot of follow-up questions. You're like, hey, what about Repin? Like, I don't know.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, you can talk to, like, I was talking to an art history, somebody who had retired as an art history professor, and he was saying, oh, what kind of artists are you looking at? And I mentioned, like, um, I can't remember who, but it was some of those type of people. And he was just like, don't know who that is. I was like, oh, well, okay. You know, but
Did you guys ever discuss, or was he against site size?
oh, so he was really curious about site size. He set up a whole site size setup, and then Ben came to teach site size, and he did a site size course, and I did some cast studies, and then Semyon decided that he changed his mind and he took them all down. His position was site size is very useful portrait technique, and you know, because you can more quickly get the proportions. But he was such a proponent of construction drawing, and um, his whole thing was you should be able to draw the form and then almost light it from your imagination.
What's your opinion on site size?
I kind of use a rough site size method for landscape painting a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I like it because it is fast to mark out, you know, you can really get the character of the tree or the mountain and stuff like that. I kind of do a mixture of site size and, you know, proportional measuring. What I'm focusing on now is going like, okay, you've got a good skill level down, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
technical skill level is fine. Like there's so many people who are so much better than me, right? And I accept that. And I am so much better than so many other people, same. But what I'm interested in now is kind of relaxing into my art making and thinking about the story I'm trying to tell. And by story, I don't mean like complicated story, but you know, like being aware of like the little implications of the things I'm placing in there, and what I'm rendering more detailed, and what I'm indicating less, and like how I'm trying to like craft the experience, and things that are slightly symbolic thrown into a representational painting.
Mm-hmm.
And by symbolic, I don't mean like if you have like a leaf, like I've got this rose painting, there's a leaf, maybe you have like an overly emphasized like spine on the leaf, but and that it's not exactly as naturalistic as it could be, but sometimes that's a better thing. Sometimes it's line doesn't exist,
Right.
it's patches of values.
Right.
But
Mm-hmm.
and there's some aspect of our brain that edges, we are hyper sensitive to edges. But the point of it is when we are naive and we make drawings with strong outlines, we always see that when someone's learning to draw.
Mm-hmm.
Then when we're mature, we learn, oh yeah, lines don't exist, don't put in those strong outlines. Then when we can become more mature, we might decide that yes, there is this element of our brain that is maybe a very basic part of our brain that really will respond to an outline. I'm interested in now sort of being a little more playful with my skills. At a drop of a hat, though, I can just like suck down the rabbit hole of like trying to do better portraits and better figure and better painting. Because when I look at a lot of my stuff, it's, can kind of lack some polish perhaps. And I think that's who I am. And I think that's okay. But you know what I mean? It's like once that you have experienced that humble experience of being a student and you're like, I surrender and I'm just going to, work really hard at this skill and that's how I'm going to gain it. There's a certain part of you that is still receptive to that mentality. I think
Yeah,
it is in me.
that's very interesting. I think that's I think it's a really good place to be
It's
where
fabulous place to be.
yeah.
Like it's one of the things of like getting older that is like a gift,
Yeah, because I think you can now never get tired of looking at a still life, and
Yeah.
then you really start to see the endless possibilities of how to paint something.
Yeah,
So
totally.
so speaking of, what are you working on now? Is that what you're working on now? Is mostly still life?
Yeah, I'm still working on this. You can see that the actual roses are like faded out. So I've pretty much painted the flowers and the leaves as much as I am going to. I've got some photo reference. I might work on it a little bit, but the cloth, you can't really see probably on the screen, but the cloth is really like under rendered, and I probably want to do some more maybe with so I've got like 2 landscapes that are almost finished. I've got a figure painting that's almost finished. I've actually got a couple more landscapes. I just have to like touch up the sky. And I made myself I'll turn the camera. I made myself, there's stacked up there. There's some pretty big canvases over there. There's
Mm-hmm.
like, so I'm going to do something with those. I have some ideas, and then I've got another big canvas next to me. I absolutely love those Dutch flower paintings where they have like a bouquet like this, but it's like tulip and sunflower and like, like obviously they painted it over the course of a year and it's just like chock full of flowers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm inspired by that and maybe gonna riff on that a little bit. Definitely this quarantine situation has me just kind of wanting to focus on comforting things like flowers and it's May. And so my here all I have a bunch of roses and my roses are just like so incredible right now. So I want to paint as many of those as I can. Going to the Painted Hills in a couple weeks too, which is part of Eastern Oregon, sort of north central Eastern Oregon. Never been
Mm-hmm.
there. Really excited to go do some landscape painting there.
Where is this by exactly?
Well, it's by John Day, Oregon.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Like I was gonna like, that's right, because you are further east, so maybe maybe you've driven through there or something.
Yeah, I think you're just outside of the Ochako mountain range. So it's like
Yeah, I think so.
northeast of like Bend and Lakeview
Yeah,
area. Yeah, it's a
exactly.
beautiful area
Yeah,
for
yeah.
sure.
And I've lived in Oregon my whole life, and there's so much of Eastern Oregon that I've never seen. And so this year, my intention was to spend time painting in more of and exploring Oregon.
So as far as like goals, painting goals, short term, long term.
The main goal is just to keep working, keep growing, to do this and keep getting going deeper and be able to maintain this until I die, whenever
Mm-hmm.
that might be. But more less generally speaking, I mean, I'm really interested in trees right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really interested in the figure and in one of the things that I've been doing this winter, my habit tends to be in the winter when it's less conducive to go outside to do landscape painting and do more figurative painting and some still life.
That's really smart.
Um, and then when it's nice out, then I'll do more landscape. But in the figurative work, I've been inspired. Like I love the figure, and it is so compelling, right? But I have struggled to find a purpose for my figurative work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's certain things I really love. Like for a while, I tried to kind of set it up like, that painter Serov. Um,
Valentin Serov.
yes, at his portraits, of people in their homes and their settings,
Yes.
so good. And they're so interesting. And so
Yeah.
like, there's so much to them. Sometimes you'll see like almost like a life-size portrait of
Mm-hmm.
people, like, but you see them in their setting and it tells so much about them. But the physical act of doing that is so challenging. It
Yeah.
is so hard. It is so much more comfortable to be in your own studio setting. It's ridiculously hard to set up in somebody else's home to get them to pose for you, or even, and then photo reference has so many challenges to it.
Yeah.
um I mean, I would probably work like a combination of from life and photo. That's kind of ideal because it is kind of nice to have some photo time too. But anyway, like if I want, like that is the vision of what I think is so interesting,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just freaking hard to do. And I don't know if I have that much effort. Another thing I find myself drawn to when I go to museums are those little studies, like particularly I'm thinking of Ong, where he's got body parts piled up on a painting,
Mm.
and they're studies for like a bigger painting, but the way they're just sort of like put on the canvas is so beautiful and interesting and so effortless. And so people might like it, but they don't necessarily want to live with it. And I don't want to store it for the rest of my life. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it's because we have opinions about people and their bodies. The figure like has to meet all these criteria in
Oh
order
yeah.
for, it's almost like fashion magazines or something.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. That's such a loaded thing. Yeah, that's true. And then
Yeah.
also, like, if it looks like a person and it's not someone like that's in their family, then that's weird. And then there's also the people that are like, oh, it's weird to have a portrait of myself in my house.
I hear that all the time.
There's like old portraits can be so compelling, and I am always like blown away of artists I've never heard of.
Hmm.
From like the Renaissance, or even as far back as those Fayum portraits.
Yeah.
They knock me out. That I'd be like, I feel like that person could walk through the door.
Yeah.
They're so striking. I always am like reminded that humans are so alike.
Yeah.
They blow me away, and so they're not really as appreciated by the present.
Yeah. Do you think you would ever own a contemporary portrait of a stranger?
Oh, sure. I mean, if it was done,
Yeah.
if it was beautifully done, of course. I mean, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. let me ask you about your studio. So
Okay.
your current studio, I don't know if we already mentioned this, is in your house.
Yeah, it's my garage. Um, I've got we live in like the suburbs, so I've got like we got a 1960s ranch house, and it's got like a garage attached,
Uh-huh.
and it's amazing. It's much cheaper to just build a wall and put a window in and insulate it than it is to buy like good garage doors. So we did
Mm-hmm.
that. And I wanted them to be sort of high so that the windows, so you can see the windows are a little bit high, so I could have models in here, and they wouldn't necessarily, like, they could be undressed and the neighbors wouldn't, see anything. Um,
Yeah.
so I got that set up, and I also have a studio in this a couple miles up the road where I teach classes and hold pop-up art shows out of. Fortunately, the space I have in town is really cheap, and I've got a little back room that I can fold all the stuff into, and I've got other artists kind of sharing it with me. So
So did you have to do anything to your, like, how big is your garage, would you say?
yeah, it's 2-car garage, so it's pretty big. Probably like 25 by 25 feet,
Okay.
maybe 25 by 30, something like that. Painted it, and I put in quite a bit of lighting, but I actually would like to I would like to open up the ceiling. Somebody put in, just nailed sheetrock to the rafters at some point. So I want to take all of that down and then insulate the roof and have some storage space up above, and then just have a little bit more openness. And I want to put in, because I've got some good light over here on this side, but over on the other side, it's super dark. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm kind of like, I'd be kind of interested in having like a skylight or something.
Cool. Do you have any hidden or funny slash impressive talents that some people don't know about?
Well, I am really into sewing. I
Mm.
am actually really good at it. I sew clothing, and I've been sewing a lot of masks right now. But that's my big hobby. So the room just on this other, as you go in, it's like it was an addition to the house. It's part dining room and part sewing room. So
Cool.
I have like I have like 3 sewing machines set up at all times, and I've always got tons of projects going. So
And so what advice do you think, like, you could give to either beginners who want to pursue or people who are, like, let's say, past the initial hump where art starts to become, let's say you're a painter or whatever, it becomes progressively more difficult. It can be, especially if you're trying to juggle a life and another job or you have children.
yeah,
So if do you have any advice?
every artist's path is unique and different, and that uniqueness is what is ultimately going to be kind of the magic,
Mm-hmm.
that makes your art interesting and makes it sustainable. So um test and explore what works for you, and keep growing. And I was just listening to a podcast this morning, and this is a good reminder that people that function at a high level have coaches a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
so find some trusted mentors and coaches, and they don't have to be people that you pay. It can be people that you just talk about, um, and that you can trust to get some feedback from and stuff like that. I think that's really important. I don't know how anybody functions if they don't do some form of therapy. Frankly, I think that's the best advice, because
Yeah.
that for me has been the most valuable thing. Is I can like to be able to accept yourself,
Yeah.
to be able to like yourself,
Mm-hmm.
all that stuff. It really makes your art deeper. And occasionally there's someone magical and amazing who's a total mess,
Sure.
but a lot of times they die young. So
Yeah.
and really your art is important. It's super important, but I don't know that it has to be something you die for, something that's worth dying for,
Yeah. So, yeah. Anyways, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I think, very thoughtful responses. And